Hi, welcome to Community Focus. I'm Stevens Point Mayor Gary Wescott, and thank you for joining us today on Community Focus. Today we have a special guest. Our Director of Public Works, Schatschneider, will be joining us. There is so much going on as we are now in spring and construction projects around the community. We're going to ask Scott to also update the community on a couple of state projects that aren't going to be done this year. Some of them are a year, 2 or 3 into the future, but it's important that we continue to talk about them in the community, to discuss them. A myriad of projects in the community, from the grade separation on Country Club Drive. Our Director of Public Works will join us in just a moment for a discussion today about what's going on construction-wise in the city of Stevens Point. But first of all, a couple of items I wish to report to the community. One very troubling item that has appeared just this week from the state legislature. It appears that almost once a week now I have a troubling item from the state legislature to share with the people of Stevens Point. This proposal comes from a couple of state representatives and a state senator who are actively proposing and floating the idea of eliminating the personal property tax and the computer aid payments that local units of government receive for tax-exempt computers and related equipment. Now, the legislation provides no payment if these taxes were relieved or removed to communities. So I guess the bottom line here is, if this were to occur, both the personal property tax to be eliminated and the computer aid payments to local governments be eliminated, that is going to increase the property tax bill for private homeowners here in the city of Stevens Point. Let me give you a couple of examples. Fully exempting all property tax, personal property tax, from the tax levy will likely result in the reduction of the incremental levy from tax incremental finance districts. That alone could have a disastrous impact on the tax incremental finance districts in the city of Stevens Point. Specifically, if the elimination of the personal property tax and computer aid payments were to become law in Wisconsin, all that is a massive property tax shift from one sector of the economy to the private sector. Homeowners in the city of Stevens Point will see increases, and in some cases sizable increases, in their local tax bill if that type of legislation were to become law in Madison. Give you an example. The personal property for manufacturing in the city of Stevens Point in the year 2014 totaled about $69 million. Personal manufacturing is another $7 million, or a total of $77 million that would become exempt for those units and transferred to private homeowners here in the city of Stevens Point. So what does that mean? Well, if lawmakers in Madison were successful in making this transfer occur, if you own a home that is valued at $100,000 in the city of Stevens Point, you will pay an additional $134 every year in taxes, just because these taxes have been transferred from the corporate or business sector to the private homeowners. And one of the reasons I'm uncomfortable with that is many of our homeowners in the city of Stevens Point are living on fixed incomes or reduced incomes. They're retired couples who are on Social Security. The last thing they need will be state lawmakers finding ways to increase their local property tax bill. We'll continue to follow that closely, report on it on our webpage and other various media here in the city of Stevens Point. A couple of other quick notes before I go to Scott. By now you are aware that the Common Council has unanimously approved the university's request to build their new biology and chemistry building at the University of Wisconsin-Stevens Point. Construction of that is scheduled to begin this fall and be done in a couple of years. It's a 172,000 square foot science building, and I think it will appropriately bring to this community important majors. The growth areas in our economy are all in healthcare related industries, which are serviced by chemistry and biology. It's also important that as we film this program, the ongoing debate continues in Madison about how much to cut university funding in the state of Wisconsin. We're currently working with the mayors of other communities, including the mayor of Madison. Every community that has a university is working on a unified message that will be delivered to the full state legislature in opposition to these radical cuts that we have been talking about for some time. I'm still amazed that anybody would support the type of devastating cuts that are being proposed for the University of Wisconsin-Stevens Point, Madison, La Crosse, Platteville, any campus, because of their important role that these colleges play in our local communities. We talk so much about the universities being key economic engines that drive regional economies. Major cuts of the millions of dollars in that magnitude will dramatically impact universities and their ability to be economic engines in a community. Now, as I have said repeatedly, and have said repeatedly in Madison the last few weeks, the University of Wisconsin-Stevens Point is a critical part of the central Wisconsin economy. Make no doubt about it, it's a critical part of that economic dynamic in this county. And if Wisconsin truly wants to compete globally, we have got to develop and maintain quality communities that attract and retain talent and spurs economic growth and job creation in a community, not find ways to shut that down. Education, research and development are major drivers of business development, and we need to, in Madison, find ways to provide further incentives and not to reduce dramatically the funding to our university system, which is going to so negatively impact business in this community. We'll keep you posted on that. There is some talk from legislative leaders in Madison about paring back that $300 million reduction. There is some discussion about whether or not universities will be allowed to govern themselves. All issues that we're working closely with Senator Lass's office, State Representative Katrina Shanklin, both of those two doing a great job providing leadership on why cutting the university system is bad for the local economy. Quick tip of the cap to our city forester and Tom Schrader, who of course Todd reports to Tom. The city has been recently notified that they have earned recognition again as the 2014 Tree City USA and a Growth Award recipient from the Arbor Day Foundation. So we're very pleased for the hard work that is done by our city forester under the direction of Tom Schrader. And are pleased that, again, we have secured two very important awards which speak to the priority that our local environment has as far as nurturing a tree inventory, planting trees, and taking care of them. So much to report to you here today, and I guess most of that now will fall to our Director of Public Works. We welcome to our program Scott Schatschneider. Scott, good to see you.
Thank you for having me.
Absolutely, good to see you. There is so much going on, and again, a lot of what we're going to chat about today isn't really under construction yet, but will be taking place in the future. So let's start with a project that I know we have talked a lot about because it started when I was here in the first 12 years, then continued under Mayor Halverson, and then basically was finished when I returned back. What's going on with the seawall project or the adjustment in that floodplain?
Sure. The seawall project, as it's commonly referred to, is currently we are working through the 90-day public comment period per FEMA regulations. And that 90-day public comment period will be done on April 16th. And at that point, we will then start the revision of our local floodplain ordinance. And that will then work through the Plan Commission. And then there'll be it's called a Class 2 notice. So that'll be run in our local newspaper. And then we will bring it to the Common Council for approval. And at that point, Wisconsin Department of Natural Resources will get involved, and they will write a letter for us to FEMA explaining to them that we have followed all of the criteria and that we've accomplished all of the requirements. And at that point, FEMA then will issue a final acceptance letter, and we should be finished. So we're looking at mid to late summer to having this completely finalized.
Let's again refresh. I know you have did an excellent job discussing in the public why this is important, why this was initiated, but I think it's important to review that. Why is this such an important project for the people of Stevens Point?
This is such an important project from the standpoint of getting homeowners out from under very expensive flood insurance. And what that does is it allows folks to sell homes and for new homeowners not to be under the burden of flood insurance. In some of these cases, the flood insurance was almost as much as their property taxes, which is a real hurdle for someone trying to sell their home it really opens up a portion of our city to real estate for folks to buy and sell homes.
Yeah, that's a really good point. That in the past, there's a point that you and the community development director had shared with me. A home may be on the market in that floodplain. A potential buyer discovers it's in the floodplain and what that might carry with it as far as flood insurance, and may have in the past contributed or discouraged the buyer from proceeding.
Correct.
Let's, before we go any further, I probably should have done this initially. I just always assume everybody knows what a director of public works does. Before we proceed, maybe for the benefit of our viewers here, what is your job? I mean, I know, but you share with the folks here in the community. A director of public works wears so many hats, and I don't know how you keep up with all the tasks and chores that you have, but give us a minute or so on the job.
The Director of Public Works for the City of Stevens Point is responsible for the engineering division and the streets division. The engineering division would include our city surveyor and multiple technicians that are responsible for maintaining and monitoring our traffic signals. We also are in charge of construction management in terms of street projects. And as far as the streets division goes, all of our snowplow crews, our garbage, our refuse and recycling division, signing, painting, and some of your routine pavement maintenance items, the crack filling, some of the sidewalk repairs. Those are all things that fall under our purview in the engineering and streets division. So there are multiple hats to wear, not to mention also our drop-off site is another responsibility that we have.
And you do a good job with it. And of course, one of the things that we have seen in the streets department used a couple of times this winter is this new brine solution. How does that work? And what's the strategy they're using that?
The brine solution is something that we have used in the past as far as pre-wetting our salt that would be spread on the roads. However, this year we took that brine solution to another level, and we use a large tank and a spray system to pre-wet our main routes in the city. And what that does is it allows us to melt snow and ice from the bottom up versus the traditional top down. And it allows us to be more efficient and in the end use less product.
So you're happy with the results so far?
Yes.
Good. Can look for it to continue, I assume, huh?
Possibly as early as tonight.
Well, or maybe several more times in the next couple of weeks. Let's talk a little bit about next on your checklist here, before I get to mine, which you don't know about, of course, is the North Reserve Street project. What does that entail, sir?
Sure. That is a project that is currently going on as we speak. The Department of Transportation is replacing the two overpass structures, northbound and southbound on I-39. And as part of that, we were able to partner with the Department of Transportation to replace a section of North Reserve Street from basically the North Century Insurance driveway to Bluebell Drive. And we will be able to, as part of our partnership with DOT, have bike lanes and a separate multi-use path on that section of North Reserve, which will be quite an improvement, and it'll be a real added feature for folks that walk and bike out on that end of town.
Well, and we're seeing more and more of that with time, where projects, as you know, under your guidance and leadership, where the addition of bike lanes, pedestrian accommodations are becoming more and more routine or a required part of the project.
Correct. And the city has really put forth an effort to make multimodal transportation an emphasis when we have the ability to do it.
And that's key.
It is
having
key.
the ability to do it. Let me jump ahead a little bit on your list here, because I know the next one everybody has been talking about for a long time is the Hoover grade separation project, or the overpass on Country Club Drive. Another project long in the making, and I have already bored our Director of Public Works about all the years that I worked on that to try and get that started when I was here, and it continued. But update us on how that's proceeding,
Sure.
sir.
The grade separation, as it's commonly referred to in the community, AECom, our consultant, has started the final design process and are working through right-of-way acquisition issues, and that project is scheduled to begin in March of 2017. So there's a lot of work to do between now and then, but I think it's a project that our community's ready for.
This community's been ready for that for a long time. You were probably back in college when we were working on this. Scott, you say the actual construction is scheduled to begin in 2017. Can that be completely done in one construction year?
That is the plan right now, is to complete that in one construction season. It is a tight schedule,
Yeah.
but our consultant believes it can be done. It'll be from the beginning of the season to the end of the season, but we should be good to go.
Yeah, the long awaited. What's the price on that again? Today's number.
Approximately 11 million.
Okay. And are there other aspects of that project as I move south on Country Club Drive that have been studied too?
Correct. We are currently looking at the Coy Drive intersection, and we are also looking at potentially extending Heffron to the east in terms of creating another outlet to that industrial park. And those will be analyzed as we go along.
And actually the one creating additional access to the business park, on the face of it, seems to make an awful lot of sense.
It does from a couple standpoints of just access, and also then from an emergency access standpoint. So they are, it's a critical aspect of the project.
Let's back up on your list a little bit. There's a project up on Burlesky Road that's taking place basically north of Highway 10.
Correct. We have a little project. It's about 800 feet to 1,000 feet long. It's a project that we had applied for funding from the state. It's a local road improvement project, and it's these types of projects are targeted for smaller projects. And this is a project that we had looked at, the pavement between basically the Fleet Farm gas station and Walter Road to the north. The pavement's pretty shot, and we thought it would be a good spot to, like I had stated before, when we do a project, is there a way for us to introduce bike lanes and pedestrian accommodations? And this was a classic example of where we're going to add bike lanes, and we're also going to put in sidewalk on the east side of Burlowski, and that'll go up to Walter, and that'll allow folks to cross Burlowski and just make a better accommodation.
When does that start?
That'll start in June, after school lets out.
Okay, all right.
Because it's so close to Bannock.
I want to talk a little bit about a couple items that always, they were on Scott's list that he prepared for me. The sidewalk repair project and chip sealing. These are really items that have appeared in budgets annually. But it's always important to say, how are sidewalks selected for replacement, and a little bit about that process, what we're doing.
The city is split into 5 segments, and each segment is looked at each year. So we're on a 5-year rotation. This year we're going to be looking at the northeast and the southwest portion of the city, and we have an inspector, and that inspector goes out and looks at sidewalk. And given the funds that we have available, it is a little bit subjective. We try to do the worst of the worst. Not everything gets fixed, but we obviously we look for panels of concrete that are hazards, and those are our first priority. So every 5 years we're in your section of town. So
if you have a sidewalk.
If you have a sidewalk.
Because as we all know, there are parts of the community that do not. And chip sealing is something we've been doing annually since, I think, Mayor Fiegelson was here in the 70s. So.
Chip sealing is the standby pavement maintenance item that every community does. And again, this year we'll be doing pavement maintenance. And so yeah, we'll be chip sealing a number of streets again this summer.
How many miles do we do approximately? It probably varies annually.
It does. We try to do that 5 miles of roadway every year.
Okay. Now, how many miles, lane miles, does the city have?
Oh, 175.
So you do the math, right? Let's take a quick look at the Clark Street Bridge project. That's another one that caught my eye when you and I started talking about that. People say, what could possibly be wrong with the Clark Street Bridge? I mean, that's a brand new out-of-the-box bridge as far as excuse me, as far as bridges go. What are we doing there?
We are addressing a scour issue,
Which nobody knows what that is.
which nobody knows
Scour
what that is.
issue.
Scour issues.
When I think of scour, I'm thinking of my wife going, here's some pots and pans, and right?
And actually, that's what the river has done to the bottom of the piers, the footings that are in the river. After the flood of 2010, as part of our bridge inspection that gets done every other year, we noticed that the Wisconsin River, given those high volumes of water, had started to eat around the footings of the bridge to a point where that has to be addressed. And basically what we're looking at doing is putting concrete bags and then a fabric over the top of those bags to keep them in place to prevent the Wisconsin River from chewing away at the footings of our bridge.
Doing what it does naturally.
Doing what it does naturally.
Yeah. Well, that's an interesting project. I remember that, I may have already shared this with Scott a couple of times, but when the bridge was built when I was here for the first 12, I think they had told me it had a life of about 120 or 130 years. Does that sound about right?
Yes.
And then the Department of Transportation, there's a time capsule in that bridge. Did you know that?
No, I did not.
There is a time capsule in that bridge, and it has a 5-page letter from the mayor at the time. So neither one of us will be here when it comes out, but it should be an interesting read that we have talked about here before. Let's move to the TIA out on Cops and Burlesky.
Sure.
And of course, maybe you should remind everybody that TIA stands for Traffic Impact Analysis.
Correct. As part of some recent developments in the Portage County Business Park, the intersection of EM Cops and County Highway R needs to be analyzed. And so we will be conducting a traffic impact analysis for that intersection this year. And depending on what that TIA tells us, there will more than likely be some reconstruction of that intersection to handle the increased traffic demands that will be out there as part of the development that we're seeing, not only in the Portage County Business Park, but also East Park Commerce Center.
So basically taking a look at today and saying if traffic continues to grow exponentially, how do we address that in the future?
Correct.
Okay. As one of the local media reports had it, a dear friend, an old friend disappeared within the last few weeks, Mickey's.
Correct.
Up on the North 2nd Avenue Maria Drive. How will that intersection improve now? Besides dramatically.
Besides dramatically, our hope is to do some design on that this spring and to realign that intersection and to make it look like a real intersection. Also adding curb and gutter on that section of Maria and adding sidewalk again to create an atmosphere where children can safely walk to school.
I think every parent would far prefer to have their child walking down a sidewalk going to school than walking in the middle of the road.
I would agree.
So that's going to happen yet this year, though?
Yes.
Excellent, excellent. In a little bit of time we have left here, there's a whole bunch of other things, so we'll move. Yeah, we don't have to rush on this stuff. You have worked very hard since I got here in December on an issue that a lot of people were talking about, is trying to make Division Street at Franklin Street safer. Sure. There were so many things that you properly identified needed to take place to at least start the process of improving safety. What has taken place at that Franklin and Division Street intersection in the last couple of months?
Sure.
Besides a lot of things.
The first thing we did with that intersection is we tried to remove some of the visual clutter that was in and around that intersection, including some signage that was no longer appropriate, removing some electric speed limit signs that we felt were could be used somewhere else. And then we also have shut off the electric message board that was in front of the fire station. And then the last thing we did is we added street lighting, different street lighting at that intersection. We replaced 2 existing sodium halide lights with LED lights, and then we added an additional light at the southwest quadrant of the Franklin and Business 51 intersection. And that has allowed, from what we can gather, at least it's picking up the students that are crossing that street from east to west at night, and so that northbound and southbound traffic can tell that there's someone in the road.
Yeah, And it is much brighter as you drive through there at night. And the other thing that I really appreciate is there are, as Scott has pointed out, basically fewer distractions, moving parts up there. You don't have a message board that would seem to almost automatically pull your eyes off the road. I mean, because it starts moving over here, and your just natural inclination is to go look and see, well, what is that? And the message boards. A couple of projects not really under the direct jurisdiction of the city, but we have had presentations. Let's talk about the I-39 Wisconsin 66 Stanley Street interchange, roundabouts. It's a state project.
It is. The Department of Transportation currently is working through a pretty significant initiative to update the I-39 corridor.
Mm-hmm.
And for us, that means some of our interchanges in the community. The Stanley Street, State Highway 66, I-39 interchange is an interchange that the Department of Transportation is currently designing. And part of that design is including 3 roundabouts. The southern one would be, or the western one I should say, is for the Green Avenue intersection. Mm-hmm. That intersection has always been a challenge given the size of the intersection to safely get through there. So there's a roundabout scheduled for that location, and then there will also be roundabouts where you would typically get on and off the interstate. So that it'll be a significantly different process, but the Department of Transportation has had a long history of roundabouts, and they feel that this is what's going to work the best, and I have all the confidence.
I think we're getting a little bit more, by we, the collective public, we're getting a little more comfortable with roundabouts. We're encountering more and more of them in communities we travel. What's the timeline for that project?
That is approximately 2018, 2019, yeah, okay. So that's a ways away yet.
Okay. Boy, so much to talk about. We never have enough time for this show, do we, John? This probably should have been a 2-hour program here today, but in the 1 minute that you have, the one that I forgot to ask you is what's going on right now with Business 51, Church Street, a corridor that consumed so much public attention for so long. What's the latest there?
We are currently still in the collecting data phase. We have taken not necessarily a step back, but as you know, the city has transferred funds for the construction of Business 51 to the grade separation. We are still working through the archaeological and historical study, and our consultant should be back to us later this summer with some of their more recent findings and the discussion regarding Business 51 on preferred alternatives will start up again later this year.
And of course, funding will be a key issue, and it probably will be a couple of years before anything substantive can occur there.
Correct.
Not just because I said that, they'll start something in a year, right? So what the heck. Scott, thank you. Unfortunately, I didn't get to my whole list, and as I told John Quirk, we probably should have made this a longer show. Thank you.
Thank you.
Our special guest today on Community Focus, our exceptional community public works director of public works, Scott Schatschneider. As Scott mentioned a moment ago, so many projects fall under his purview, and Scott and his team doing a good job really for the people of Stevens Point. That is our Community Focus program for this time around. Special thanks to Scott and to you for joining us here on Focus. As always, if you have comments on this program or have issues you wish me to address, feel free to contact me here in the Mayor's office. Until next time, thank you for joining us today on Community Focus.